Lamp and garden names whispered in fear across Liverpool's streets, masterminding a £1 billion drug empire. Hidden behind encrypted screens. For years their messages were thought untouchable, their secrets sealed tight. But when law enforcement cracked the code, everything they built began to unravel, exposing a dark world no one ever saw coming. Liverpool had always been known for its proud history, its music, its football, and its docks. But beneath the surface, something was quietly building, something the public couldn't see. Over the past decade, a new kind of criminal empire had taken root in the city. It didn't operate in the open, didn't flash wealth, and didn't attract attention. This was not the old-school gangster world of flashy cars and loud personalities. These were silent, faceless operators who lived modest lives and ran one of the most lucrative drug networks in the UK, worth over £1 billion. What made this group different wasn't just the money or the scale. It was how invisible they were. Police officers patrolling the streets had no idea that some of the people they passed were coordinating multi-million-pound drug shipments with just a few taps on a screen. These criminals weren't meeting in pubs or dark alleys. They weren't making calls that could be traced. Everything was done through encrypted phones, protected by layers of digital security that made their communications seem untouchable. To the outside world, they were ordinary people. Some worked part-time jobs. Others lived with their families or drove delivery vans. But in reality, they were part of a complex and highly organized web that stretched from Liverpool to Europe and beyond. Drugs were smuggled in through cargo containers, hidden in imported goods, or moved over land in modified vehicles. From the outside it looked like nothing was happening. But behind closed doors, thousands of kilos of cocaine, heroin, cannabis and ketamine were moving through the city every month. Local gangs handled street-level distribution, but the real money flowed higher up, to the shadowy figures who never touched the drugs themselves. They used layers of couriers, encrypted messages, and false identities. Police could sense the volume of drugs on the streets growing but couldn't pinpoint the source. Traditional surveillance failed. Wiretaps turned up nothing. Every door they knocked on led nowhere. What no one knew then was that the key to exposing it all was already in place, hidden inside the encrypted phones the gang trusted most. Their empire felt unbreakable, but in reality, the clock was already ticking. Encrochat was never designed for criminals. At first, it was just another encrypted communication service. A tool created for people who wanted privacy in an increasingly connected world. But for drug traffickers, gang leaders and career criminals, it became something else entirely, a fortress. The phones were modified Android devices, stripped of microphones, cameras, GPS and anything that could be used to spy on the user. Every message was encrypted, every call was scrambled, and if someone felt the heat, they could press a special code and wipe the entire device instantly. No data, no trace, no evidence. In Liverpool, these devices became standard among the top levels of the drug world. For just a few £1,000s, a user could buy access to a private, encrypted network, where they could speak freely without fear of being recorded or traced. It gave the criminal underworld something they'd never had before: complete confidence. On these phones, the gangsters shared addresses, bank details, photos of weapons, and even hit orders. They planned drug shipments, discussed prices and coordinated movements, all in plain language, trusting the system to protect them. But even plain language wasn't always used. The top players developed their own codes and nicknames. Cocaine was called tops or boxes, cash was paper, guns were toys, and assassins were gardeners. Every message was laced with slang and cryptic references, designed to hide its true meaning from outsiders. Real names were never used. Each contact was saved under a pseudonym, a number or a word, chosen to mean nothing to anyone except the sender. The scale of operation was staggering. Messages recovered later would show orders of up to 100 kilograms of cocaine being arranged in a single conversation, with street values topping several £1 million. But what made the network so dangerous wasn't just its size, It was how well it ran. No violence in the streets, no drama, no mistakes. Everything was professional, clean, and hidden behind digital walls. To law enforcement, it was like chasing shadows. They knew someone was behind the drug flood, but they had no faces, no fingerprints, and no phone calls to trace. The criminals had found the perfect mask. Or so they thought. At the heart of Liverpool's encrypted drug empire was a strict system of roles and routines. The entire operation functioned like a business. Only instead of sales reports and emails, there were encrypted texts and secret bank drops. The people at the top were never seen handling drugs themselves. They relied on a chain of trusted operatives, each playing a specific part. Orders were passed down, jobs were carried out, and payments were made, all without a single face-to-face meeting. Every major player used a nickname to protect their identity. There was Frosty, the strategist, who oversaw the logistics of importing shipments from South America and mainland Europe. He never stayed in one place for long, and operated almost entirely through his Encrochat device. Then came Lamp, the contact on the ground. His job was to ensure shipments landed safely, often by bribing port workers, truck drivers, or customs officials to look the other way. Finally, there was Garden, a name that appeared frequently in messages. His role was far darker. He handled cleanups, a polite code for violent enforcement, threats, and disappearances. The communication between these figures was cold, calculated, and efficient. They discussed prices per kilo, shipping routes, and quality control like executives at a corporate meeting. If a batch was too wet, too cut, or too late, it was reported and replaced. Suppliers in the Netherlands and Spain were contacted through encoded messages. Payments were made in cryptocurrency or dropped off in bags through couriers with no idea who they were working for. Shipments of drugs were hidden inside legal cargo, bananas, kitchen tiles, machinery parts, even children's toys. The gang had access to fake import documents and tracking numbers. Once the cargo entered the UK, it was sent to small warehouses and lockups across the northwest. From there, the drugs were divided into smaller quantities and distributed to street-level dealers through a network of runners and drivers. Despite the complexity, the operation ran smoothly. Mistakes were rare, and when they happened, someone paid the price. The hierarchy was strict, the discipline brutal, and loyalty was everything. Anyone who asked too many questions disappeared from the network permanently. While Liverpool's drug empire grew stronger and more confident, a secret was unfolding thousands of miles away, one that would eventually destroy the very foundation the gang had built. In 2020, French cybercrime investigators discovered a flaw in the Encrochat system. It wasn't publicized. There were no warnings. Instead, the French authorities quietly lawless one of the most ambitious digital stings in history. They developed malware that could silently install itself on Encrochat devices, recording every keystroke, every message, and even activating the microphone without the user's knowledge. The operation was kept tightly controlled. For months, police forces across Europe, including the UK's National Crime Agency, were granted access to a flood of real-time data. It was like opening a secret door into the criminal underworld. Every message sent through Encrochat was now being copied and stored. Conversations that were once invisible to law enforcement were suddenly exposed in full. Drug deals, money laundering threats, and even murder plots were laid bare in unfiltered, raw detail. At first, the messages were overwhelming. Millions of lines of chat appeared, full of coded language and unfamiliar slang. But soon, patterns began to emerge. Authorities noticed certain words repeated often: boxes, paper, toys, dig, garden. Each term had a meaning. Investigators formed specialist teams to decode the messages, track locations, and identify the users behind the aliases. Then came a breakthrough. A message was intercepted, mentioning a shipment, 60 boxes landing at the docks Thursday. Keep lamp away, too hot. The phrase seemed simple, but to the team watching, it was a direct clue. 60 boxes referred to kilograms of cocaine. Lamp, a known alias, was being kept away because the area was under surveillance. This wasn't just chatter. It was a live operation in progress. Authorities acted fast. They monitored the dock area, traced vehicle movements, and placed surveillance on suspected warehouses. For the first time, they weren't guessing. They were following instructions written by the criminals themselves. The Encrochat network had become a trap, and its users didn't even know they'd already been caught in it. The walls were closing in, quietly, efficiently, and with precision. Before dawn broke over Liverpool's industrial skyline, a quiet storm was brewing at the Seaforth docks. Armed officers in unmarked vehicles surrounded a shipping warehouse on the edge of the port. It was just another crate arriving from Spain, labeled as ceramic tiles, but intelligence gathered from Encrochat revealed what was really inside. Hidden among the legitimate cargo were 60 tightly wrapped packages of high-grade cocaine. The street value was estimated at over $5 million, but the drugs weren't the most important find. Attached to one of the packages was a discreet GPS tracker, placed by the gang to monitor its delivery. That tiny device would unlock a map of the entire operation. Using that tracker and Encrochat messages, police were able to follow where the drugs were heading, who was receiving them, and how they were being distributed. Each movement was matched to a message. A van leaving the dock was confirmed in a text. Boxes landed, heading out now. A safe house in Bootle lit up on the tracker at the same time a message came through. Drop made. Keep eyes shut. Surveillance teams were quickly mobilized. Plainclothed officers tailed vehicles, monitored addresses, and tracked suspects in real time. The gang, unaware they had been exposed, continued sending updates through their Encrochat devices. No longer a mystery. It was a digital diary of a billion-pound empire, and every word written in it could now be used in court. As arrests began to ripple through Liverpool's drug world, the once impenetrable silence started to crack. Lower-level couriers and middlemen, who had once held their tongues tightly, began to cooperate with investigators. Some were motivated by fear, others by the promise of reduced sentences. Their testimonies revealed a side of the operation that had remained hidden from police for years. One courier admitted to regularly transporting nearly £250,000 in cash each week, carefully avoiding detection by using multiple drop-off points and changing routes constantly. Another disclosed secret meeting places, locations that appeared ordinary on the surface but were in fact central hubs for the gang's activities. One particularly surprising find was a safe house beneath a local church, where drug packages and weapons were stashed in concealed compartments under the floorboards. Further investigations uncovered a hidden bunker deep in the wooded outskirts of Liverpool. This underground lair was like a fortress, reinforced walls, surveillance equipment, and vaults filled with vacuum-sealed bags containing millions of pounds in cash. The bunker also held a list of coded names, which corresponded to trusted lieutenants and delivery contacts. It was the nerve center for the gang's enforcement and money laundering operations. As the network's infrastructure came to light, police began to see just how extensive and sophisticated it was. It wasn't a loose collection of street dealers. It was a tightly controlled machine built on discipline and fear. Disloyalty or mistakes were not tolerated. Any hint of betrayal resulted in swift and severe consequences, often disappearing people without a trace. What shocked investigators most was how ordinary many of the people involved appeared. Behind closed doors, quiet families, local business owners and seemingly average citizens were running a multi-million-pound illegal empire. Their ability to blend in made the investigation harder, but also more vital. The stakes were no longer just about drugs. They were about protecting communities from the violence and corruption hidden beneath the surface. Every new arrest revealed more secrets, but also hinted at how much more was still out there, waiting, lurking and adapting. The gang's walls were crumbling, but the echoes of the network would be felt long after the last phone was seized. In the wake of the extensive surveillance and intelligence gathered from the Encrochat network, law enforcement launched Operation Venetic, a coordinated, large-scale assault on Liverpool's hidden drug empire. Over the course of 10 days, police executed simultaneous raids across the city and beyond. 34 homes were stormed in the early hours, catching suspects off guard in their beds, at family dinners, or going about everyday routines. The sheer scale of the operation sent shockwaves through the criminal community. Among those arrested were the highest-ranking figures known by their nicknames on the Encrypted network. Frosty, the mastermind behind international cocaine shipments, was found living quietly in a modest council flat, working part-time at a local car rental company. His unassuming lifestyle made it nearly impossible to connect him to the billions flowing through the network. Lamp, the fixer who bribed officials and oversaw cargo unloading, was arrested at a gym where he trained daily, blending in with other fitness enthusiasts. Garden, the feared enforcer responsible for violent cleanups, was caught hiding in a rented apartment, armed and ready but outnumbered. All three carried Encrochat devices, the very phones that had sealed their fate. In court, prosecutors presented thousands of intercepted messages as evidence: plans, threats, financial transactions, and orders that detailed the full scope of their criminal enterprise. The messages exposed not only the crimes committed but also the cold efficiency with which the network operated. The bosses were shown to be detached from the street violence, controlling their empire from behind encrypted screens. The arrests also unveiled an unexpected side of the operation. Many of the suspects had no prior criminal records, lived seemingly normal lives, and were careful to keep their illegal activities hidden from family and friends. They used multiple layers of deception, from fake businesses to cash transactions, designed to avoid leaving a trace. But the one mistake they made was trusting the security of Encrochat. With the kingpins in custody and their communication network dismantled, the drug ring's grip on Liverpool began to loosen. Yet, as the trial unfolded, it became clear that, while many were caught, some key players had slipped through the cracks. The operation was a massive victory. But it was only the beginning of a long fight against the shadowy world of encrypted crime. As word spread through the criminal underworld that Encrochat had been compromised, panic swept across Europe's drug networks. The encrypted system, once seen as unbreakable, was suddenly exposed as a trap. Users scrambled to destroy their phones, erase their contacts, and vanish without a trace. But for many, it was already too late. The last messages intercepted by police showed a desperate and chaotic picture. One of the final texts read, "Game over, burn it all." Therein, this simple phrase marked the end of an era. Many users frantically deleted conversations, wiped devices or discarded phones in public bins. Others fled their homes or switched to new, even more secretive communication methods. But despite the chaos, the damage had been done. Over 10,000 Encrochat users in the UK alone were now under suspicion. The stolen data had exposed drug shipments, money laundering schemes, weapon trafficking, and violent threats. Criminals who once believed they were invisible had been laid bare. For law enforcement, the shutdown of Encrochat was both a victory and a warning. The data gathered provided an unprecedented insight into the scale and sophistication of organized crime. It also showed how reliant these groups had become on digital security, a reliance that made them vulnerable when that security was breached. The sudden loss of Encrochat left a gap in the criminal world, but it also sparked a scramble to find new tools. As encrypted communication goes dark, new platforms emerge. Police worried about what would replace Encrochat systems even harder to infiltrate, with stronger encryption and more layers of anonymity. Meanwhile, investigations continued. Arrests were made, trials held, and convictions secured using the mountain of evidence collected from the messages. But the network's echoes persisted. Some criminals went underground, while others adapted quickly, adopting new technology or changing tactics. Encrochat's fall was a reminder that no system is foolproof. The very tools criminals rely on for protection can become their undoing. For now, the battle had been won. But the war against encrypted crime was far from over, and new threats were already on the horizon. The trial of Liverpool's biggest drug ring captured public attention like never before. For months, the courtroom was filled with prosecutors laying out a vast and chilling web of criminal activity, all made possible by the encrypted messages hidden in thousands of seized phones. The evidence was overwhelming. Detailed chat logs showed not only the scale of the drug trade, but the ruthless efficiency with which the network operated. Jurors saw how carefully the bosses orchestrated shipments worth millions, managed complex money laundering schemes, and ordered violent enforcement without ever directly touching the drugs. What shocked many was how ordinary the accused appeared. Instead of the flashy gangsters the media had imagined, these were mostly quiet, unassuming people who blended seamlessly into their communities. Their double lives highlighted the evolving nature of modern crime, sophisticated, secretive, and often invisible. The prosecution's case was built largely on the digital trail exposed by the Encrochat hack. Every message, every photo, and every time-stamped location formed a digital breadcrumb trail that connected aliases to real people, places, and crimes. The defendants' attempts to deny involvement crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Some were convicted of drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Others received sentences for possession of illegal firearms and involvement in organized crime. But the case also raised important questions about privacy, surveillance, and the future of policing in a digital world. Defense lawyers argued that the Encrochat operation had invaded privacy rights, and there were debates over the legality of hacking encrypted devices. Yet for many, the verdict was clear. The criminals had abused technology to exploit communities and profit at an unimaginable scale. The ripple effects of the trial went beyond the courtroom. Police forces across the UK reviewed their strategies for tackling encrypted, investing in new technology and training. Community groups pushed for better support for areas affected by the drug trade, aiming to break the cycle of violence and poverty. Liverpool's drug ring had been brought down not by brute force, but by digital detective work. A reminder that in the 21st century, battles against crime are increasingly fought online. Though the network was shattered, the story served as a warning. The war on organized crime continues, and the next generation of criminals will always be looking for new ways to hide in the shadows.